Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. After the Prophet ﷺ passed, there was a big fitna that happened. And Abu Bakr was now the Khalifa. So people started to slander, some people were leaving Islam. And Abu Bakr, he said, whoever practiced their religion for Muhammad ﷺ, then know he has died. So whoever came to the Halaqa tonight for Sheikh Yasser, he's not here. I'm sorry. Alhamdulillah, Sheikh Yasser gave a beautiful khutbah earlier about Aisha radiallahu anha, the daughter of Abu Bakr Siddiq and the wife of the beloved Prophet ﷺ. And unfortunately, he had to do a very last minute travel, and he asked me to fill in his position. So I was blessed to be able to do that, alhamdulillah. As the verses that Sheikh Muhammad Shakir, he mentioned earlier, we're talking about the ifk, or the rumor that was spread about Aisha radiallahu anha. Sheikh Muhammad, he went rogue a little bit, and Saeed had to read the rest of them, but that was the full story, or the ayat that were talking about the story. So after the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, they migrated to Medina. They were living in their own city now, and they're in their own environment. And whenever the Prophet ﷺ was going to travel for whatever it may be, he would draw slots, or pick straws as we may call it today, to figure out which one of his wives was going to go with him. So this time, it was Aisha's turn, radiallahu anha. So it was her turn to go travel with the Prophet ﷺ, and they were going to travel for what was an expedition. So and at that time, whenever they traveled, just like in the olden days here, they would be in some sort of a carriage. So if you've seen old movies, women and children, they sat in this carriage that was pulled by horses, and the men usually were on top of the horses, etc. In that time, there was a carriage that sat on top of the camel that the women would sit in. So Aisha, she said this was after, and she's narrating this story, by the way. This is her first-hand version of the story. And so she said this was after the time that hijab had become obligatory. So she's going out with the Prophet ﷺ with the companions on an expedition, and she's in her carriage. And she said this carriage would sit on top of the camels, and women would sit inside of this carriage to be protected. They had their own little space that was nice and comfortable. And she said at that time, I was younger, and as the women, when they're younger, they're usually a little bit lighter. This is Aisha's words, not mine. So when they sat inside of this carriage, if they were younger and lighter, as Aisha says, not me, the camels they wouldn't notice the camels would be affected by the women being in them. So if there's a lot of weight in the carriage, you could tell from how he's walking, the camel's a little lower to the ground, and he's affected by it. But because they were lighter, they weren't affected by it. And they went off on their trip in the middle of the night. So the caravan now is going along. They're going on an expedition. Aisha, she's in her, radiallahu anha, she's in her caravan or in her carriage, and they take a stop, they take a break. Aisha, she needed to take care of herself, and she went off in a distance into the desert. Mind you, it's nighttime. She goes off in a distance, and she takes care of her needs. On her way back, she feels her chest and realizes that her necklace is not there. So she immediately turns around to go back to look for her necklace. So now she's searching for her necklace and she can't find it. Alhamdulillah, eventually she finds it. But when she does find her necklace, it's already after the caravan has left. So now it's nighttime, she's in the middle of the desert by herself. And she said, when I got back to my position, I realized that they had already left. So I sat down, waiting for them, hoping that someone would come back and find me. And I ended up falling asleep. Excuse me. She said, I waited for them to come back, and I ended up falling asleep. So when this happened, another man that was late to come with the caravan was coming up behind them. His name was Safwan ibn Mu'tal as-Sulami. He was coming up behind them, and he sees a person in black, she said, laying down asleep. And when he gets closer, because he had seen Aisha before the hijab had become obligatory, he realizes this is al-Mu'mineen Aisha radiallahu anha, and he starts to back up slowly. He didn't say anything because he didn't want to disturb her in her sleeping, but he starts to back up. And when he starts to backtrack, Aisha wakes up, radiallahu anha. She wakes up, she says she covers her face and her body and with her hijab and her jilbab, the word that she uses. And she said, wallahi, he didn't say one word to me. He put the camel to go down on its front legs, She got on top of the camel and he led the camel on. And they went on until they reached out with the rest of the army, and that is all that happened. He didn't say one word to her. He let the camel kneel down so she could board it. She got on top, and he directed the camel while she sat on top until they got to their destination, or they caught up with the rest of the army. Now, when this happened, some people saw that and started spreading rumors. And the story goes it goes on, and it's very long, but they started slandering Aisha, our mother Aisha, and said that this companion who very honorably led her back to the caravan had committed adultery with her. Wa'adhu billah. And this gets back now to the caravan, and when they get back to Medina, some of the major hypocrites that were in the time of Medina, they spread this rumor and it goes wild. And now Aisha complains to the Prophet ﷺ, and she said that she had never seen a more lutf, a more soft and consoling and gentle face on the Prophet ﷺ than when she complained to him about what had happened. Now I want us to imagine, whether you're al-Mu'mineen Aisha radiallahu anha, or you're her beloved Prophet or husband and Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who have now been accused of adultery. And your wife, as the governor, the father of children, the Nabi, the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the leader of your community, your wife has been accused of adultery. And not just accused of adultery, because in our context, yes, it's bad, but it's not like how it was then. To mention, or to perhaps bring a little bit of how things home a little bit, when I was in Mecca, I got into a guy's cab. Very long, funny story, but throughout our trip, we started talking about Obama. And I mentioned Obama, his father is Kenyan, his mother is Caucasian. He says, where's his father? And he's asking all these questions, as I was tend to get when I was in my cabs. And I said, oh, Obama is the son of adultery. And the man's mind is blown. Literally. What? How could you say that about your president? I said, oh, no, Obama wrote this in his own biography. He went crazy. Slows down. What do you mean Obama, your president, is the son of adultery? I said, his parents weren't married. Sort of common, unfortunately, in our country. He says, how does this man show his face in front of the UN? How does he wrote it himself? So now this is an Arab, more conservative society. Imagine 1,400 years ago. Imagine in conservative 50 years ago here, but 1,400 years ago in Desert Arabia. I'm telling you about a man now who just so happened to be drunk while he was driving me, was going crazy. Imagine 1,400 years ago. So this is the Prophet ﷺ and his beloved wife, as Sheikh Yasser mentioned in the khutbah earlier, when asked who was the most beloved to him, it was Aisha radiallahu anha. And his most beloved is now accused of fornication, and this is the rumor that's spreading throughout the community. And she was in this state for, I believe, a month's time. And it wasn't until there were ayat, as Sheikh Shakir, he mentioned, or he read, that freed her of this. The Prophet ﷺ didn't say, no, my wife didn't do that. He didn't defend her. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed verses freeing her of any of these slanders or any of these things that were said about her. But this story is set in stone. It is forever going to be an example for us in our community of the severity of the tongue. How important and how devastating the tongue can be in affecting our communities. This was Aisha, al-Mu'mineen. It is forever in our Quran, it is forever in our history books, of how she felt when this happened. When the word fully got back to her about how people were spreading lies about her. And I'm going to read to you the exact words of what she said. She said, فَبَكَيْتُ تِلْكَ اللَّيْلَةَ حَتَّى أَصْبَحْتُ لَا أَرْقَى لِي دَمْعٌ. She said, I cried that night until I had no more tears. I would fall asleep and wake up and continue crying. She cried until she had no more tears. She was just crying now, nothing's coming down. And this is our mother, Aisha. So what about us? This is Aisha, her iman is where her iman is. She had the Prophet ﷺ as her husband. Later on, verses were revealed just for her, radiallahu anha. What about people in our community? This is how severe words can be. And this is why it is so important for us to control our tongues and the things that we say. The Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr, they weren't, and the other companions, weren't shaken by these things. The Prophet ﷺ didn't just kick her to the side, he didn't divorce her, or a'udhu billah, he didn't say, that wasn't my wife, or make any claims. He stood by her, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Bakr and the other companions, they stood by her until the point where Abu Bakr was going to stop providing support for his nephew who was involved with this slander. Which is why in the verse that Sa'id, he read the translation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, don't stop providing support for him. And this is why we have to stand by our brothers and sisters. I mentioned why it's so important for us to control our tongues, but now when we hear things, what do? Are we gonna stand by our brothers and sisters when we hear slander, when we hear gossip? Or are we gonna run with it and cause these devastating things? And this can affect us as a community on many, many different levels. Imagine when someone wants to get married, someone spreads this one little rumor. Oh, Sheikh Asri was telling me when I was preparing for this, that there was a man in New Jersey who owned a shop. One woman said she went in there and saw a magazine that had magic and Masonic things and things of this nature. She told her friends, who told her friends, who told their husbands, who told everyone, and so much so that this man's business was now affected by this. One rumor. And I'm sure we all know stories of people who now can't get married because one person told a lie, or that person does X, Y, Z, that person did such and such, and so now their name is forever ruined. Or stories spread that that person does magic or whatever, now their name is forever tarnished. And this is how dangerous it can be. But what about our brothers and sisters who we don't know, who we naturally have our own pre-existing ideas about them, our own prejudices about them? Maybe someone isn't telling us a rumor, but maybe we've been conditioned to think certain things. The brothers and sisters who come home from jail. Oh, they did X and Y, Z crime, they paid their time, their dues are done. Maybe they didn't even do anything, as we saw in the document the 13th, as almost 75% of people plead guilty for no reason because they don't have proper representation, a whole nother conversation. But what about our brothers and sisters who come home from jail? How do we treat them? Do we even consider them for marriage? Do we even consider being their friends? Do we even consider having a handout for support? SubhanAllah, a woman came to the masjid today, and she said a man told her, and she came in the office, I was in my office, but she came in the office, and she told Khadija, our receptionist, that a man told her, you have to cover your hair. She said she's come to the mosque 6 times, she's not Muslim, but a man told her, you have to cover your hair. She was crying in the office because of this. Alhamdulillah, she was very positive. And she said, perhaps because I come so much, they know me, and he just felt he could tell me whatever, I have to cover my hair. But now imagine if someone were to carry that story. Such and such doesn't wear hijab anymore. Brother so-and-so does such and such. And now that gives back. She was crying just because the man approached her in this way. She's not even Muslim. What about our sisters who don't wear hijab and we're spreading rumors about them? What about our brothers who don't come to the masjid anymore and we're spreading rumors about them? We saw a picture on Facebook, on Snapchat, they were at the club, they were doing such and such, they were with such and such people. It spreads and their names are tarnished with no reason at all. There's a statement of Imam Shafi'i. Sheikh Asher told me the poetry. I told you I memorized 2 lines of poetry from Imam Shafi'i. This is not one of them. He says, "Ihfadh lisanak ayyuha al-insan." Preserve your tongue, O person. Because if you don't, it will bite you because it's a snake. It's a thu'ban. He says, how many people are in their graves now because of their tongue alone? And how many of those people wish they were now with their families? Again, he says, preserve your tongue, O people, because if you don't, it will bite you because it's a scorpion or because it's a snake. How many people or how many cemeteries are full of people whose tongue killed them, that wish now they were with their close ones? So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to benefit from the story of Aisha, our mother, radiallahu anha, and see the effects of the tongue and how it can affect society. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to preserve our tongues and our private parts. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, if you promise for me two things, you'll get Jannah. Your tongue and what's in between your two lips, or what's in your mouth and what's between your legs. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to preserve our private parts. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be conscious of Him in all states, to allow us to think about Him before we speak. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be good people in our society, not just within our community, with outside of our community, people who are known for righteousness. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the patience and the forbearance of our mother Aisha radiallahu anha. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the strength and the unity of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions who stuck by her side. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove any hardship that we may have in our chests, and to remove any discomfort that we may feel for other people. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us a non-judgmental people. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us lovers of His beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his wives and his family, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the embodiment of ihsan. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam was patient through this. He was the embodiment of ihsan. And if we love him, then Allah will love us. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.